What's happening, everybody? Welcome into a brand new episode of Crossed Up. Anthony Sanfilippo is here. I'm Bob Wankel. And Anthony, Phillies split a quick two-game setup in Toronto with the Blue Jays. We talked on Monday. We said if you go into the series and you can get a split, you'll take it. It's funny when you say these things ahead of time, and when you look at it and it's forward thinking and you're a little bit rational, you kind of say, all right, that's cool. Like, Toronto's a good team. The Phillies don't play well up there. A split feels like a win, sort of. But then you watch it play out, and the way that they kind of gave away the first game, credit to them for rebounding, but it kind of, again, to me, is a continuation of a pattern that we've been talking about a lot lately, which is this team is sort of just missing opportunities to truly gain that separation. Like, the NL wildcard race has not come, it hasn't gotten away from them. Like, they're not coming back to earth. They're maintaining that 3.5 game lead. And that's great, because as the season shortens, obviously the greater the likelihood that you secure one of those playoff spots. Like, they're not in a position where they have to gain ground. They just can't lose it. But man, it feels like they've had some opportunities to really distance themselves here and finally get to that place they haven't been, which is holding a 5, 6, 7 game lead. Like, when was the last time the Phillies had a 6, 7 game lead on a playoff spot in any season? I mean, it has to be going back to 2011? Like, it's not been comfortable at any point here.
No, you're right, Bob, and that's the one thing. Like, if I sit here and say, as it's, we're recording on August 18th, and there's 6 weeks left in the season, if there was one thing that you sat there and said, what concerns you, it concerns me that they haven't separated themselves. Like, there's still no doubt in my mind, and I think that there's probably no doubt in yours, that this team's going to be in the playoffs. I'm still very, very, very confident that that's going to be the case. But it certainly would be nice to be comfortably into the playoffs, right? I mean, you have that 3.5 game lead, and that's great. And you have 3 games against a Nationals team who we're going to talk about is actually playing some pretty good baseball lately. So this is not as much of a gimme series as maybe Washington series of old have been. But then you got the Giants, who, again, they've been struggling as well. But, you could, by next week this time, either have completely separated yourself, or we're sitting here going, uh-oh, it's a race.
Yeah. And
you really got to take advantage of these. And the fact of the matter is they could have been kind of in that place already if they would just not blow opportunities like they have in the last couple of weeks. A game against the Royals, a game against the Nationals, the game against Toronto on Tuesday night. Like, if you win those games where you should win, or you had a real good chance of winning, then these games aren't as important here. It's like, okay, yeah, you win 2 out of 3. That's fine. That's all you really need to do. You don't don't get swept. That's what we're talking about. Like, and you're fine. Everything's okay. But now you get into a situation where it's like, well, man, you really have to do well in these series. Otherwise, you're going to put yourself in a bind. And so, yeah, that's the one thing that I think that the Phillies have missed some chances, and you go, why? Why did you let that happen? Why are you putting yourself into a tougher situation than you really need to be in?
Yeah, and relative to the rest of the league, the Phillies continue to play well. They haven't run away. They haven't ripped off another one of those June-like stretches lately, but you go back to the homestand, 6-4. Like, it's not great. We wanted 7-3, 8-2, but it's not like they put together a 3-7 homestand. Like, they're still playing pretty consistent baseball. And every team has these games that get away from them. Every team can look at their recent 10, 15, 20 game run and say, if we would have closed the door on that one, if we would have given our pitcher a little run support, if we would have made that play in left field. There are a lot of different teams that are saying these exact same things to themselves right now. But I think for this Phillies team, maybe if there is something that's troubling, it's that the issues they're having are recurring issues. It's not, this is new, or, this guy is slumping all of a sudden, or, this is a problem we didn't previously consider, and now here it is in front of us. And I guess in a way that might be a good thing, but I think it's somewhat problematic, and it goes back to what you wrote about after their win on Wednesday night, which is, yeah, good win for the Phillies. Certainly the Blue Jays defense helped them out in that game, and then they kind of took off late. But nobody really wants to talk about the fact that the Phillies got a series split, had a nice rebound win. Bryce Harper hits 2 home runs. Like, we can talk about all of these things because they are important, but everyone wants to talk about what's going on in left field with Kyle Schwarber, and certainly everybody wants to talk about the continued struggles of Aaron Nola. And I guess, you obviously wrote about this. You went into a great amount of detail and a great amount of length with this, but I guess the way I would ask you this question, like, rather than just sit here and rehash the struggles, because we know what they are. The left fielder can't catch. He's hitting a $180. Like, Aaron Nola hasn't been good for a month and a half now. Like, we know the deal here. Do you think it's fair that fans are so fixated on these 2 players in particular? Like, do you think that the frustration and the concern is warranted, and is it fair?
Is the concern warranted? Yes. Is it fair to pick on these 2 guys and these 2 guys alone? No. I think that's the way to look at it. There are absolutely criticisms that are deserved for both Kyle Schwarber and Aaron Nola. Neither one have performed up to the level of expectation for this season for this team. That being said, they've at least done enough to get the Phillies to where they are now, to contribute to the Phillies being 11 games over 500 and the top wild card team. They've done enough. It's not, you're not happy about it, but it's like, okay,
Well, if they were doing what they were theoretically supposed to do, like, Kyle Schwarber's not a 300 hitter, right?
No.
But if Kyle Schwarber was hitting 210 right now and his on-base percentage, we've talked about, hey, he's drawn a lot of walks. His on-base percentage is still pretty good. It's one of the better ones on the team recently, all that stuff. But, like, overall, his on-base percentage isn't exactly electric. It's not like, oh my goodness, this guy's an incredible table setter. So if he were 30 points better, 30 points better, and Aaron Nola, I mean,
if his ERA was about a half a run, even just a half a run less.
4.
Right. Instead of 4.5. Yeah. If it was
now,
4.
are we talking about that team right now that is 6-7 games ahead of the rest of this wild card race?
You're probably talking an extra couple wins.
Yeah.
I mean, each individual player is not worth that many wins, right? So, but you're probably looking at an extra couple wins. I think obviously pitchers are worth a little bit more than hitters as far as determining wins and losses. But yeah, I mean, they're probably, instead of 66 and 55, they probably have 68 wins right now, or 69 wins right now.
I want to talk about Schwarber first, because I almost feel like the city is united in their disgust with Aaron Nola. And like, is that fair? Probably not, but let's get to that in a moment. I think this is the realization that I've come to lately with Kyle Schwarber. There seems to be a lot of people, and I don't know if you get this on Twitter as well, but when Kyle Schwarber heats up, he puts together some 5-6 game stretch. It's like tweet worthy. He does something where you're like, Kyle Schwarber's last 15 at bats, his OPS is 1,400, right? Like, and people go, oh, here we go. Like, always highlighting the positive with Kyle Schwarber. He can do no wrong, media darling. And there seems to be like some backlash, like towards writers and towards the people covering this team, that we sort of protect Kyle Schwarber. That if anything, he really should be at the front of the line in terms of guys taking shots right now. And yet we sort of guard him. And I kind of want to explore that first. For me, the way that I see it, certainly he leads the National League in home runs last season. He probably is going to finish with anywhere between 37 to 43 home runs this year, depending if he can get really hot in September. That might be a little bit of a stretch, but I don't think it's unrealistic to say he could hit 40 home runs again.
Well, he's still pacing for it, right? I think it's 40 and 99 right now is his pace. Okay.
And so he's not going to hit 200. We know that. Like, that's not going to happen. His defense is abysmal, but when I look at him, I don't think that they make the playoffs last year without him. Like, I think that he was a stabilizing force in a locker room that did not know how to win, that did not know how to rise to the moment, panicked down the stretch. We've seen that for a number of years. I think that there was something wrong with that clubhouse in terms of like really knowing how to seize the moment. And whether or not that's fair, I know it's a little bit of a subjective criticism, but I think that there's something to it. And I think that Kyle Schwarber, when things started to crumble a little bit last September, and all the fans said, here we go, same old Phillies, it was Kyle Schwarber's presence, I believe, that stabilized that thing and kind of got them over that hump, allowed them to relax, and then allowed that team to also understand once they reach the postseason, hey, we're not just here, but now that we're here, we can do some fucking damage. And that's the way I see it. And I still look at the OPS and I look at some of the on-base skills, and this team has no power. He supplies that. Like, in my mind, I can still make it blows me away that people think that he should be out of the lineup entirely. Yeah, you don't want to hit him lead off, that's fine. But to say that this guy shouldn't be on the field or shouldn't be in the batter's box at least, I find that to be quite strange. Now, the only other thing I will say on this is that I also do understand it to an extent from the fan viewpoint, because I don't know that they quite look at the intangibles of things maybe the way that you do when you're a little bit closer to it. And I will also say this, to not protect him, he's been a dreadful athlete this year. Like, he's been a bad baseball player. He doesn't hit for average. He strikes out way too much. Like, to strike out as much as he does, he should probably be hitting 50 home runs. Like, he gives away series, like not at bats or games, but series where you're just like, oh, he was 0 for 12 with 6 strikeouts, but he had 2 walks. It's hard to live with a baseball player who can be so bad for a prolonged stretch, but then be so good for a prolonged stretch. And I think when you see a professional baseball player not be able to catch a fly ball in routine spots multiple times throughout the course of a season, or a line drive, or whatever you want to call it, I get why fans are upset, because they're going, hey, that's little league shit. So I kick it to you and kind of give me your overall assessment of Kyle Schwarber.
Yeah, I think that you nailed a lot right on the head with this. So, first of all, Kyle Schwarber does 2 things well in 2023. He hits home runs and he walks. He does nothing else well in 2023. And that's just who he is this year. Now, does that portend for a good future? Maybe not. The fact that he's been really unathletic, like you pointed out, that he can't even catch a simple fly ball. I mean, at least last year, I mean, he would make mistakes in left field, but it wasn't to the degree that they've been this year, right? So does that portend for a good future for him? It may not. It may be that this is it for Schwarber. Like, this is kind of what's left. And if he runs into a good pitch and can drive it out of the park, great. If he can rely on his great eye and get on base walking, that's good too. But that's it. I mean, this should have been a season with them changing the shift rules that Kyle Schwarber should have at least been able to bump his batting average a little bit. Not a lot, but he should have been in that 220 range, right? Ultimately, with the opening up on the left side, the right side for him as a left-handed hitter. And he didn't. He went backwards. And so that's a major concern. Do I think he's a media darling? I don't get that feel. Like, I mean, yes, is he a guy that we feel comfortable talking to in the locker room, win or loss, because we know he's going to give us a good, thoughtful answer? Yeah, but I don't necessarily think we go, oh, that Kyle Schwarber, he's such a good guy. You know, we're not going to criticize him.
I agree with that.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, he deserves criticism, and he gets the criticism that he deserves. What I think that we lose sight of sometimes in this city, and we've said this before on the show, so I don't want to rehash it, but we lose sight of the fact that baseball, unlike the other sports, is not one that you can really hammer guys from game to game. It's one that you got to take more of a totality kind of a perspective on things. That's why when we look at it, we look at things in terms of months, right? I mean, yeah, what was that month like for that guy? You know, July, Nick Castellanos was freaking terrible in July, but has bounced back now so far in August, but he's still got a couple weeks left to see what his August is. So like, we look at it in bigger picture stuff with these players. And I think fans want to criticize in the moment a little bit more. And that's typical Philadelphia. That's not a big surprise. So I think that's why we get the sense of, oh, we're being too light on Schwarber when we're really not. I think that the other thing is, Bob, is this is a very traditional sports market, right? So in that sense, our fans look at baseball lineups and say, there's no way a 180 hitter or a power hitter who can't run should be leading off in the sport. Because traditionally, you didn't have that, right? Traditionally, that's not what a leadoff hitter was. But if you look around baseball today, look at who's leading off games for teams. And yeah, some of them have the ability to steal bases and have higher batting averages. Of course, your Ronald Acuñas of the world and Mookie Betts, but they also hit for power. They're going to be 40 home run guys. At minimum, every good team in baseball, at minimum, has a guy leading off in their game who are going to hit 25 home runs this year, at least. And so when you look at the Phillies, other than a guy like Bryce Harper, who's not going to hit 25 home runs because he got such a late start on the power this year because of the elbow issue, other than Bryce Harper, who else on this team fits that mold to be a 2023 leadoff hitter? There is no one else. There just isn't. I mean, we could sit here and I broke down all those numbers and we could go through that, but the reality of it is that in baseball in 2023, your 1 and 2 hitters have to have slug if you want to be a good team. The Phillies' only slug guy is Kyle Schwarber. So that's why he's there. Is he perfect? Is he ideal? No, but he fits for what the Phillies are. And so that's why. So I think that's another reason why fans get so bent out of shape about Kyle Schwarber is because of where he's batting. If he was batting 5th, 6th, 7th, nobody would care that he's hitting 180.
Yeah, I have. And the thing is, when you look at Kyle Schwarber's career numbers and look at his splits throughout his career, I mean, he hits 233 against righties. He's hitting 204 against lefties. He's never been a high batting average guy. He's not a guy that you expect to hit 300, push 280, 270 even. Right. This year, though, it does come down to a little bit of a different level. I mean, he's hitting 184 against left-handed pitching this season. He's hitting 177 against righties. And this is something that beyond this season, I think he's going to have to figure out. I would tell you that for this team right now, I don't even know by saying it works if I even really feel that way, but I almost feel like to a degree, it is out of necessity. They don't really have a better alternative. I don't see a world where we can just say, oh, well, this is what Kyle is. He can come back next season and hit 179 as long as he hits his 37 home runs. I actually don't think that's an acceptable use of a roster spot in baseball player. Now I know they have him for another 2 years. I know what the contract is, but there has to be improvement on his end. This type of trajectory is not good. And I think when you talk about the way people view him, it is a lot about the lineup slot, but I also think it's about the inability to play the game. And I guess this sounds super critical, but what I mean by that is this city is traditional. They want to see guys be moved over. They want to see productive outs and, for the lack of a better term, small ball. And he doesn't often do that. He does not move a runner from second base with nobody out with a ground ball to the right side. That's not his game. And then when you pair that up with the defensive limitations, which, as you said, last year it was more about range, not getting the balls that you would like your left fielder to get to. This year it's about the actual execution of the catch, which is an entirely different set of problems and, frankly, much more embarrassing and frustrating to watch. So I think when you pair all of those different things up, you do look at this player and say, great, yeah, he hits home runs and walks. That's awesome. I think for a lot of people, it's hard for them to get over that, and I do think that the leadership quality is still there. I do think that he's important in that clubhouse. And ultimately, I do think that he's one of the few guys on this team that can give you that 2-week stretch. You talk about getting to October and what can happen in October. Listen, if the Phillies are going to make a run, they're going to need special performances out of their better players. And does he have a series or two in him where he can hit 6-7 home runs and get them past a team that's probably better than they are? Yeah, I think that still exists. And so I think you have to ride that potential out.
Mm-hmm.
And one other thing that you said that is interesting to me, I watched some of the Eagles preseason game last night. I don't know why. But you talked about how when you're covering baseball, you can't be totally overreactionary, right? Like you can't freak out about every bad stretch, every bad game. And certainly like I'll text you and I'll have like a take, or I'll say something that's like a little bit critical of someone. But there is a difference. Like as a fan, you can be really frustrated in that moment. But when you cover, and this is the thing I don't think people necessarily understand. And I'm not here to dish out media lectures. But if you have access, if you have credentials and you're trying to cover a team fairly, first of all, you should know better. Like if a good player with an established track record goes through a tough stretch, you can reasonably expect at some point they're going to get out of it or they're going to have a moment where they do deliver. So as a writer, what do? Do you say, well, this guy sucks in July. Holy shit, they should think about benching him. Man, he blows. And then 3 weeks later, the guy goes on a run where he carries the team for 14 games. Like it makes you look like a clown if you react in the moment to every single thing you see. Like, don't get me wrong. As somebody that covers or used to cover the Phillies on a more consistent basis, I do it periodically now. I get frustrated with certain things. I say, what the hell was that? What are we doing? You got to do better here. But you can't tweet out every single thought that you have and rip apart every single player and then expect to be treated like a professional in the workplace when you go down there. It just isn't how it works. So when fans go like, oh, you're protecting Kyle Schwarber. No, I'm not. Like, yeah, when he dropped that line drive late in the game on Tuesday night, I said, what the fuck was that? You got to catch that ball. Like, I know that. But what are you going to do? Hop online and destroy the guy? Like, come on, man.
Yeah.
And listen, there's different variables. Like, how long does it go on for? What type of person is the player? Like, I'm not going to lie. There is a human element to this. But it's funny you said what you said because I'm watching this Eagles game last night and Trey Sermon, who's like the 4th or 5th string running back. I mean, he was a big time college player, right? And there's some people that think that he could be a useful NFL running back, maybe even crack this Eagles roster. He fumbles. And, there's like reporters like, he's cut, he's gone. Trey Sermon's not making this team. And I'm like, damn, like, it is a different mentality in football. Like there is less of a sample and you probably like the in the moment take probably holds more weight than it does across 162 games in a baseball season.
Yeah.
To be clear, I'm not criticizing necessarily those writers for tweeting those things. Like I think Kemsky actually like the moment the ball hit the ground was like Trey Sermon's cut. Like I get it. He's probably right too. But like, man, like, you give up a home run in game 1 where you give up a home run in spring training and you're tweeting that a guy's cut. Like it just doesn't work. It doesn't translate to baseball coverage. It just doesn't.
Yeah. It's a different animal, baseball. And we don't look, today's society is very in the moment, right? Everything's in the present. There is no, it's the whole, what have you done for me now mentality of sports. It's just the way it is. We don't have the attention span that we used to have back in the back in the day, as us old heads say. But the fact of the matter is that that's just how we are that way with everything. We're that way with the NBA. We're that way with the NHL. We're that way with the NFL. And now it's pervasive into baseball too. And I've made the argument, Bob, and we've talked about it. I think, that there's a little bit of the gambling element kind of comes into play a little bit sometimes.
I agree.
And I think people are betting on their home team. They're betting with their heart and not with their head. And they get
wrecked my parlay.
Yeah. They're getting more upset about things maybe now than they ever did before. But you're right. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And it's interesting because this is the one sport where guys can have, you and I had this text conversation. These guys like Schwarber and Nola, they can have shitty seasons and be terrible for the year, right? Come October, like you said, Kyle Schwarber can go on a 7-day run where he's just tearing the cover off the ball and win a series. Aaron Nola could have 3 or 4 starts in a row where he pitches like the guy that we expect him to be, and all of a sudden that wins you 3 or 4 playoff games. And holy hell, where did that come from? It happens in baseball more than any other sport where it's the ebb and the flow of the sport where a guy can have a bad year, but you're still relying on him because he's one of your guys. And yes, he comes through when it matters the most. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen. These guys can continue to struggle into October and could end up costing the Phillies a playoff game or two. Certainly could happen. But the reality is that the way that the game is, they could just as easily flip that script. I think Rhys Hoskins was a great example of that last year.
Yeah.
It was a guy that he was beat up on by this city from beginning of the season to the end of the season. Can't wait to get him out of there. Want him out of the lineup. He's terrible. And then he goes into that Atlanta series and is just a monster against the Braves. And it's like he became a hometown hero.
Yeah.
Because he got hot for 2 weeks, right? I mean, that's the example right off the top. So, yeah, I mean, there are concerns with both these players, and we're going to get into Nola here in a second. But the reality of it is that they have a track record and the talent to do well over at least a short period of time that you've got to at least count on them to still be able to be in those moments. And if they deliver, that's the bonus for you. If they don't, okay, they don't. It's part of that bad year.
So in an effort to acknowledge just how bad Aaron Nola has been here recently, I'll throw out some numbers just so that we can all, if you're listening to this, you're probably frustrated with Aaron Nola and want to hear someone pound on him a little bit. So here we go. 3 August starts. He has a 5.87 ERA in 6 second half starts post All-Star break. He has a 5.24 ERA. His whip is actually up to 1.311. Hitters are, I believe, batting .266 against him in the second half. And I point out some of these numbers because previously we had said, listen, the results aren't necessarily there. Yes, he does give up a lot of hits with 2 strikes. Yes, certainly the home runs have been a massive problem. But when you look at a lot of Aaron Nola's other numbers, you see wow, the batting average against is still elite. The whip is still elite. The strikeout to walk ratio is still really good. There are a lot of different numbers that suggest that Aaron Nola is still among the National League's 10 to 15 best starting pitchers. The problem is now recently, against some pretty average to below average offenses, those numbers are starting to deteriorate now. And you look at the velocity and you see 4-seam fastball, 91 miles an hour, and you go, oh my God, there are a lot of issues here now. And so he has not been good. Forget the contract. Forget about 2024. That's not even the conversation. What? I guess the 2 questions right now are, what is going on, and what do you do about it? While also acknowledging that yes, there are 6-7 weeks left and a lot can happen. But right now, I mean, this is not good.
No, it's not good. And he's had probably his worst season of his 9-year career. And you could see that it's frustrating the hell out of him out there on the field. You could just tell, he's throwing pitches and he's, giving up a hit or giving up a home run in a spot that he shouldn't give it up. And he's not finding the answers. One of the things that I think is really evident about what's wrong with Aaron Nola is guys who used to get out are just dragging on their at-bats against him. He's throwing way too many pitches early in the game. Aaron Nola can throw you 105, 110 pitches a game, and it used to get him through 7 innings, and now he's having a hard time getting through 5. And he's still getting swing and miss. I think I put one of those tweets in my story that showed the other night, even as bad as an outing as it was for him, he still had more swings and misses than any pitcher who pitched on Wednesday night. And that included a guy like Clayton Kershaw who pitched on Wednesday night. Nola had 17 swings and misses in that game, I think it was, right? So that's a lot, right? But at the same time, he's not putting guys away, and it's because his pitches just aren't sharp enough right now. The curveball is probably still his best pitch, but even the curveball isn't as sharp as it's been. It doesn't break as much as it usually breaks, and guys are able to get a piece of it, and foul it off and live to see another day. And you're right. The velocity's down on his fastball. His strikeout totals are down for the year, and his walk rate is going up. Now, it's not like it's at an alarming rate. It's actually kind of on par with his career. But in the last couple seasons, he had been able to get his walk rate down below 2 per 9 innings. And that included a guy like Clayton Kershaw who pitched on Wednesday night. And now he's back up at 2.5, 2.6, which is, kind of what his career average is. And so when you're not striking out as many guys and you're walking more guys than you did in the last couple of years, you're certainly putting more runners on base, and you're giving up more contact. And if you're giving up more contact, you're likely going to give up more hits, especially if your defense behind you is not the greatest. And it's creating a situation where he's got runners on base, and then he gives up the long ball, which is, that's the biggest problem of them all. He's given up 27 home runs. Even if he had only given up, say, 20 at this point, what's his ERA this year? It's probably below 4, right? It's probably high 3s if he's given up 20 home runs instead of 27. So I think that's what it really comes down to, Bob, is that his stuff is just not where it needs to be. And it's not like this is what makes baseball so frustrating for pitchers sometimes. You don't have to be that far off to be the difference between being really good and being this, right? I mean, he's just a little off, and it's killed him. It's absolutely killed him this year. And I know that's eating him up. I talked to the guy on a somewhat regular basis, and I know that's what's eating him up this year. And it's just a matter of not being able to find that little extra that he had in previous seasons. And who knows if he will ever be able to find it again. This might be the end, right? I mean, or he finds it again and he's back to Aaron Nola, or he's somewhere in the middle. We don't know. Like, you can't predict the future. But I do know that's what he's going through this season, and he just can't find it at the moment.
Yeah, it's funny when you really dive into the advanced splits here and you start looking at, like, well, situationally, where are the struggles at? Because we know what all of the major talking points are. But when you even go through his, like, by count splits, batters this season, like, if I told you that on first pitches this season, opposing hitters are batting 389 against him with a 1.111 OPS, would you be stunned by that? Like, that's not good. It's terrible. But, like, okay, he's trying to establish something. Guys are trying to be aggressive against him early. They're having some success. Like, I don't think that's, like, crazy to think that that's possible. But where I look at this by count and I go, how is this possible? Is when he is in an 0-1 count. So he establishes that first strike. Opposing hitters, 359, slugging 642 against him. Like, I mean, to me, that is crazy. Like, you are supposed to be one of the game's best pitchers. You're ahead in the count, and you're doing that. You're giving up, and you're allowing that type of damage. Like, it's just things like that. And, we talked about Schwarber and not playing the game, not being able to play the game the way the fans here want you to play the game. I think that there's one extra annoying twist, and it's not the contract. I mean, it is the contract, but the other twist on this is the inability for Aaron Nola to provide a shutdown inning. Like, the Phillies tie a game. They get some momentum. He gives it right back. The Phillies get a lead. He gives it right back. I saw someone pull it, and I wish I would have flagged it the other night. Someone pulled it. I think it was like Bill Bear, if you remember him. Mm-hmm. Like, he did a thing by game on Aaron Nola and shutdown innings, and I think his, like, shutdown inning rate is only like 64%, like, which is terrible. Like, literally 35% of the time that you get a boost from your team, you can't hold it down that following inning. Like, that's no good. And I think that situationally, it's very frustrating to watch this play out with him. If it were Taijuan Walker having this season, or Christopher Sanchez, or, even Ranger Suarez, who has been up and down himself, I think you'd say, like, all right, but this is supposed to be a dude. Like, this is supposed to be an elite guy in a really important season for this team. And, like, these questions about, do you hand him the baseball in a playoff series? Like, though I think they will, and I said it as recently as Monday, like, he's probably going to start the second game. I would still bet on that. I can't like laugh at a fan for asking that anymore.
Well,
I don't think that's a preposterous conversation.
WIP put a poll out if they would even put him in the playoff rotation, period. Not even game 2, but period. And the fans were 50-50, but I think it was like 51-49 against starting him in the play. So, of course, they're going to think that, right? Of course, they're going to think it. but the reality is, and this is more of an indictment, I think, of the other players, and it is about the fact that you sit there and go, well, he's one of the guys, he's a dude, we got to get him in the rotation. If you take him out, who are you putting in place of him? And justify it for me, because you can't really
do some role playing. All right, so I got Zach Wheeler. He's the best pitcher in the staff, so he's game one.
Okay.
I'm going to just tell you, I can't really do this, but I'm going to tell you the way that people are thinking about this right now. Hey, Michael Lorenz in 2 starts with the Phils.
Yeah.
Just threw a no-hitter. He might have another good game tonight. We'll see, right? This is a guy, he's been around. He seems to be kind of cool and calm under pressure. I'm in. I want Michael Lorenzen starting a postseason game for me.
Okay. Do we want to talk about that? Because I don't disagree.
Okay.
I think Michael Lorenzen is
start a playoff game.
Michael Lorenzen could work himself into this, and not just because, oh my God, he just threw a no-hitter and he's the game before he threw 8 innings, 1 run. Like, it's not just that. It's that, he's been good all year for Detroit. As a matter of fact, now that he's in the National League, if you included his starts in the AL, he would lead the National League in WHIP.
Yeah. I mean, I actually think he is going to start a playoff game. So, I have no...
It's possible, but here's the one concern, Bob.
I know.
Well, I mean, it's a legitimate concern. Sir Anthony Dominguez has been terrible, right? I mean, really not been good. And you really don't have another right-handed arm in the pen other than Craig Kimbrell that you're going to, in the playoffs, where you're going to go, I rely on that guy late in a playoff game. Yeah. And look, you're counting at this point, you're counting on Jose Alvarado to come back and be Jose Alvarado. And if he is, that's good too, but he's a lefty. Soto's been not great either. I mean, he's been better than Dominguez, even though the numbers may say the other way. I think, but you watch them pitch, I have more confidence in Soto coming into a game than I do Dominguez at this point coming into a game. But you really need another setup arm. And I think that, when you look at what you have in the pen left-handed with Alvarado, Strom, and Soto, I think that you're more likely to want to feel like you want to put Lorenzen back there because you need another right-handed arm than you would Suarez as a 4th lefty, right? So that's the only thing. I don't discount the fact that Michael Lorenzen's been a very good starting pitcher this year and probably deserves to start a playoff game, or more than one playoff game for that matter. But if you're trying to say what's the best thing for this team, it might be Michael Lorenzen's available out of the bullpen.
Yeah, I mean, the Dominguez thing was something I wanted to get to, and it's an entirely separate issue. But the command for me, it's not that the numbers, it's not that he's giving up a ton of runs and the ERA is crazy or anything like that. Like, second half, I mean, he has a 3.86 ERA. In 9 games, he's allowed 3 earned runs, so it's not that. It's not about like the run prevention element of it. It's that his command is just, it's not there. He's pulling everything. It's a mess. And if they don't rectify that issue, if that's something that we don't feel better about in the next 6 weeks, I do think that you have to consider what you just talked about. Now, there's 2 different points to this. I don't think, even though Taijuan Walker is won a lot of games, he's kept the Phillies competitive, I don't think that most fans, if they're being truthful, would rather see Taijuan Walker start a postseason game over Aaron Nola. And I don't think that they want to see Christopher Sanchez either. I think that most fans, there's some crazies out there, but I think most people would say, yeah, I get it. But the one part of this where I think you might see some otherwise reasonable folks say, hey, you know what? Let's go Wheeler. Let's go Lorenzen. Let's go Suarez in a 3-game series. I don't trust Aaron Nola in a 3-game series. And if they can get by the first round and you need to go 4 deep, then you can slot in Nola 2, 3, 4, wherever you want to, wherever it makes most sense for you. However your rotation lines up, go for it. But in a 3-game series, I just don't trust the guy right now. I can't take one of my shots with Aaron Nola when I have 3 guys that I can make a case for. And I think you could. I think you could make the case for certainly Wheeler. You could probably make a case for Lorenzen. And if I wanted to make the case for Suarez, though I would go Nola over Suarez, I would say, he's calm under pressure. The whole like slow heartbeat. We saw how effective he was in big spots in the postseason last year. We know how Nola's postseason ended last year. I know he was very good at the beginning of it, but like I could work myself if I'm like just out for Aaron Nola right now. I can get myself to a place where I'd say like let's go Wheeler, Lorenzen, Suarez. I wouldn't right now. I wouldn't, but you know what? 6 more weeks of this, maybe like I too will be that guy and be like, you know what? I just can't do it anymore.
And well, the other question is, if you're not starting Aaron Nola,
what are you doing with him?
Is you putting him in the bullpen? Like,
yeah. I mean, you might as well not even roster him at that point,
right? Because he's never pitched in relief,
right?
Like, you're going to ask a guy to suddenly say, okay, you've had a bad year, we're going to take you out of the rotation. Now go do something you've never done before, and we're going to ask you to perform in a postseason doing.
And does he seem like does he seem like a real malleable guy? Does he seem like he would be? No. I mean, the fucking pitch clock thing is real with him, right? Like, it has had a profound impact on him 5 months later. And I'm not trying to excuse away all of his bad performances by just saying, oh, it's the pitch clock. But, like, we know how much he has struggled with that. He's been very open about it.
Yeah.
So, like, now we're going to put him in a different context, in a different situation, which he has no familiarity with, and expect him to thrive when all eyes are on him in the highest possible pressure situation. No way.
Yeah.
And along those same lines, like we've talked about this before too, but what's Taijuan Walker's biggest issue right now? Oh, he's not good in the first inning that he's out there. His velocity's down. You want Taijuan Walker revving it up in the bullpen? Like, I actually don't know what his future is going to be come October. Like, I don't know how you use him right now.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like if either of those guys were guys who could, hit 97 on the gun, you could almost kind of convince yourself, well, we can make it work. With one of them out of the bullpen, but they don't. Neither one of them throw that hard. Nola's more of a pitcher than he is a thrower. And
here comes Aaron Nola with runners on first and second, which again, he's terrible with runners on base.
Yeah, he's only going to throw 93, right? He's only going to throw 93.
He's throwing 91. It's a little chilly out, so he's not all lathered up tonight. 90 on the corner. So I mean,
that's what I'm saying. So, like, I mean, what do you do? Are you just now not going to have Aaron Nola or Taijuan Walker, for that matter, on your postseason roster? What are you doing? These are two of your higher paid pitchers. You're just not
40% of your 40% of your starting rotation that you're paying a combined $35 million to this season. Yeah, you guys are just gonna.
Yeah, forget it. We'll get to you down the road if we need you.
On a positive note, I guess we see Bryce Harper the other night on Wednesday night hit 2 home runs in the same game for first time this season. Is he back? Like, I guess really the question is it reasonable to think that perhaps he is turning a corner? I'm not saying that he's going to finish the season with 25 home runs all of a sudden, but like, do we think that it's possible that in the next 6-7 weeks you get to October, Bryce Harper can be Bryce Harper?
Yeah, I do. And it's not just because of the 2 home run game, Bob. I mean, if you just like look at the way he's been hitting the ball in recent games, and when I say recent games, I'm not just talking this past week. I'm talking this month, maybe even a little bit towards the end of July, right? I mean, I think that there's been a change in how hard his how he's like really just making the contact that you want to see. And that's what now. I think that's 4 homers since August 5th. So 4 homers in the last 8 games, 9 games, whatever it is. And I think it's, and since he got off that 2-month schneid, so it's 6 homers since the All-Star break. So that's 25 games. So it's just, you're just starting to see it, it's ramping up. It's getting there. Like you said, he's not going to hit 25 home runs now just because he's got 9. He's not going to hit 14 in the last 41 games. But will he hit, another 7 or 8? Yeah, probably. And that's good. And then you start to say, okay, now we're on the pace of Harper hitting home runs, 1 every 10 at bats or whatever it is, right? And that's kind of where you want to be. And I think that's kind of that's a good sign for the Phillies. And, the fact that he's still hitting 290, he's still getting on base really well. He's still working his walks. And now you add that element into it too. I think you're starting to get the Bryce Harper that you want batting third in your lineup every game, and he's going to be a guy for you when the games matter the most. He even said it after the game the other night. He's like, August and September is fun. He says, but I live for October. And, we saw that last year, and I think that he's kind of getting himself into that mode, gearing into that mode for the rest of this season. So I think that's a big positive for the Phillies.
I want to ask you one quick question, and I want to look ahead to this national series because they're kind of an interesting team suddenly.
Yeah, they are.
Does the Phillies postseason experience of last year matter? Because they didn't have it last year and it didn't matter. They did what they did. Are we setting ourselves up to be fooled here by this team because they had the run last year? Do you think – I think there's a lot of different layers to this. Do they think as a team, well, Red October, just get us to the bank and when the air turns crisp and we'll go on our run? Every year is different. You got to play the games. We've seen teams that have won it one year, not win it the next year. Teams that have come up short one year, win it the next year. What do you make of the 22 Phillies? Because for so long, I've said, every year is different. What happened last year does not equate to this season. But, you hear Harper say something along the lines of, I live for October. We know what this can be like. We know what we have in this clubhouse. We proved it to ourselves last year. So how much of that is a difference maker for this team?
Well, I think it matters on one level, and then the level that it matters on is the fact that they didn't win, and so they know what it takes. They know what it takes to get there. They know how hard it is to get there, and they know, how to deal with that stage. So I think that does matter. I think that does make a difference. That doesn't necessarily equate to, guarantees that they're going to be successful again.
Yeah.
Because I do think we get a little bit too caught up in, we did this last year, so we can do it again. In a lot of ways, I point to 2011 as the season where we kind of we had a great expectation and they came up really, really short. And we say, well, geez, what they won 102 games, the best team that this city's ever had. And oh my, how did they fall so short in the first round against the Cardinals? But if you really go back and look at 2011, and while they had the great pitching, their lineup was not very good that year. And a couple of the big guys were really good that year. Howard had a Howard type year, but not like a Boffo year. He hit 33 homers, had 116 RBIs. But other than that, their best offensive player that year was Victorino.
Victorino, yeah.
Was their best
they had
offensive
to go out and
player.
get Hunter Pence. They needed reinforcements. We think about that team, that era of just beating you over the head offensively. But by the time 2011 came around, and certainly a little revisionist history here, that sort of portended what was to come. We saw what happened here.
Jimmy Rollins had a down year. Utley was he was injured for part of the year. He only played 103 games. Ibanez wasn't what they thought he was going to be when they got him. He was beloved, right? But he really didn't have that. He had a really kind of a down year. Polanco was a good hitter, but he didn't have any slug whatsoever. Chooch had a really good year that year, right? But that was if your best offensive players are Shane Victorino and Chooch, yeah. What does that tell you? But we had this great expectation because it was the greatest starting rotation ever put together. Ruben Amaro did that phenomenal job putting that team together. They won 102 games. That was team. They were going to win their second World Series, and then they get gagged by the Cardinals in a 5-game series because they couldn't hit.
Yeah.
We could be facing that similar situation this year where it's we have this great belief in this Phillies team because of what they did a year ago. But they're a little bit more flawed in places than we thought that they were, and we're kind of just glossing over it a little bit because we know they're going to be there.
So because we both believe they're going to be there, I think this is an interesting exercise on August 18th. Then, what is an acceptable outcome for this team? Because the 2011 Phillies were a 102-win team, as you said. They're playing an 83-win Cardinals team. Yeah. They had a series lead. They had I believe, a lead in what was it, game 2? That was the Cliff Lee game, right? Where they kind of but then they even come back and they win game 3. They have 2 opportunities to close it out. 1-0, the Holiday game, and nothing was ever the same again. Like, we all know how that played out. And you looked at the win discrepancy between the two teams, and that was ridiculous. And the expectation made that loss even more ridiculous. But with this team, what is unacceptable? Certainly missing the playoffs would be unacceptable at this point. If they get into a series with either the Giants or the Cubs, is that?
I think losing the wild card round, no matter who your opponent, no matter who the opponent is, would be unacceptable.
And then if they line up with the Braves, which I guess is the likely outcome here, and Atlanta beats them over the head because they're one of the best offenses of all time, like, do we say, okay, good season, boys?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you'd be disappointed, but I think it depends on how the series goes too, right? If you lose a series to the Braves, it's a 5-game series, and you lose in game 5, and it's a close game, it's like, oh man, that's frustrating that they couldn't pull that one off. But you chalk it up to the fact that, yeah, you lost to the Braves, man. Like, I mean, that's the best team in baseball. You probably accept it. But if you go and get swept by the Braves 3-0 and the games are not competitive, I think it's a disappointment, right? I mean, this is a team that's built to beat that Atlanta team, and to at least play with them and be able to have a shot to beat that Atlanta team. So you want to be competitive in that series. So yeah, I think that what the outcome ends up being, depending on who they're playing. Now, if for some reason they fall to 6 and they win that wild card round, and then you're playing the Dodgers in the second round and you lose, even though the Dodgers are playing great baseball right now, they've won 11 in a row. They have 2 potential MVP candidates on their team. You beat a team like that last year. The Cardinals had 2 potential MVP candidates on their team, and you beat them. I would probably be a little bit more disappointed if they lost to the Dodgers in the second round. I would think that would be a letdown. I think losing to the Braves does not, I don't consider much of a letdown, but I think that anywhere else, I think, would be a letdown.
I do think it will be easy in the moment if they lose these games. Like, say they get to Atlanta and they're holding a 5-3 lead in the 8th, and then, Matt Olson hits a 3-run home. Like, it's going to be very easy to get annoyed and angry and bitter and frustrated about this team if they don't get to where they want to go. It's funny, though. We've sort of accepted this reality this season because Atlanta got off to the start that they did. I think I detached myself from the Phillies being a division contender pretty early on. Probably by mid-May, I was like, there's just no chance. They're just not this team. I said this to you, I think, back in the beginning of the year, though, or maybe it was right around the time that I sort of had that detachment. They need to get to a point as an organization. And listen, they were in a World Series last year. They will very likely make the postseason this year. The season is not over. They might actually get back to a World Series. I don't know. But I would like to see them get to a place in the next couple of years. And I don't know if they will, because the minor league system's still bottom third, and they have a bunch of aging contracts. And yes, they'll spend money, but they have to spend it correctly. Like, they need to get to a place where they're not, aiming at 88 wins and a wild card spot 12 games behind the team that wins the division. Like, they've got to get to a place as an organization where they go into a spring training and say, like, division's ours this year. We're winning this fucking thing.
Well, I'll tell you, the one thing about Atlanta is I think there is a vulnerability there with that team this year. The more I watch them play, and that offense, like you said, is off the charts good. I mean, it's the best offense we've seen in baseball in quite some time. But I think there is a vulnerability with their pitching, and somebody's going to get them. I think it's possible that somebody can get them. Shorter series is more likely than a longer series, but you have to pitch. You have to outpitch them, and you can. But your guys have to be good, and you'd like to think that the Phillies guys could do it, but has anyone other than Wheeler of late made you think that they will? No. And so that's where I think that you sit there and say, if there's going to be a frustration, if there's going to be a disappointment, it's going to be the fact that the pitching staff was good, but not good enough. And that's where you might get more frustrated with the Phillies than anything else. The lineup notwithstanding, obviously they got a hit. You can't expect to beat the Braves 2-1, right? Because that offense is too good to shut down 3 games, 4 games, 5 games. But so the offense has to do their part too. But you almost want to sit there and say, man, if the pitching was just a little bit better, we could have beaten that team. And I think that could be an area where the frustration could come in against Atlanta.
All right, so let's take a quick look ahead here. Phillies get 3 with the Washington Nationals. First 2 are in Washington, and then they head up to Williamsport, right? On Sunday for the third game. And listen, Phillies had Washington at Citizens Bank Park last week, and they won 3 out of 4 games. And I don't know that anyone's going into the series scared, but it's kind of interesting. You look at the Washington Nationals' last 34 games, and they're 21-13, and at home in the last 17 games, they're 14-3. I don't know. I mean, listen, the Phillies are a -200 favorite tonight. They have Lorenzen on the mound. Who are they throwing? Who's Washington throwing? Is it
it's what's his last? Adu? What's his last name? No.
However you pronounce that.
You know who I'm talking about, and it's driving me nuts that I can't remember his name. But yeah, it's a kind of a lopsided pitching matchup, if you really want to be honest about it. It's Adon.
Yeah, Adon. So, I mean, you look at them tonight, you feel like, hey, they should win this game. You probably look at all 3 matchups in this series and think they should win this game. I assume that, going back to what you said in the beginning of the week, you would be happy with a 3-2 stretch over 5 games here, dating back to the Toronto series in this one. And I'm taking it that's where you are right now as well.
Yeah, I mean, you got to look at it and say you just win the series, right? You can't, this Nationals team their lineup is not as bad as people make it out to be, especially the top half of their lineup. Those guys get on base, they hit home runs, and they hit the Phillies a little bit too, other than Lorenzen. But then you got Sanchez going Saturday against Cole Irvin. Sanchez has been great for the Phillies, but his last couple of starts have been not as good. I mean, 2 starts ago was worse than his last start, but he's had moments where he's looked a little bit shaky, and you're starting to wonder if that's starting to catch up to him. And then Sunday is Suarez against Williams. Phillies, chased Williams pretty good when they faced him in Philly. So when you're up in Williamsport, you hope that you chase him pretty good up there too. So yeah, I mean, I look at it and say that this is a 2 out of 3, and if you get all 3, awesome. But I think it's a 2 out of 3, and the Nationals hit, man. I think we went over this last time. They have their 3rd best batting average in baseball.
5th right now.
Or maybe it's the National League, 3rd best in the National League.
Yep, 3rd best in the National League. I mean, they're up there, and they're at least middle of the pack in most offensive categories. So I think when we look at them as a bottom feeder team, we look at it, they must be bad all the way around. Like, they can get you, and they don't
strike out.
Yeah, they don't strike out. So.
Yeah. So that's just it's not as easy a matchup as you would think going in. But
well, to kind of go full circle here, we talked about at the beginning of the show, putting together that stretch where you start to create some distance. And in theory, you should be able to do that here. Like, is it that much to ask that the Phillies take care of the Nationals, come home and beat up on a Giants team that they are better than? Like, I know that they kind of struggle with San Francisco. It feels like recently, last few seasons, the Giants have been an issue for the Phillies, but like, come home, take care of business against that team. St. Louis is dreadful. They're a terrible baseball team. They're checked out. Beat up on them. I think they have the Angels down the line here at the end of the month. Like, the Angels suck. Like, I'm sorry.
You might get Ohtani pitching now, because originally he wasn't.
You might get Ohtani. I'm not telling you got to sweep these teams, but like, win these series. This is where you put together. I'm asking 2 out of 3, 2 out of 3. Win these series. Get to the end of August. Have your 6-7 game lead build up going into that last month, and then maybe you can do with what they've been trying to do for the last 4 months, which is manage innings, protect players, give extra days off. And you can do those things without feeling like you might be jeopardizing yourself a postseason spot. Like,
I agree. I mean, look, if you go 8-4 to the end of the month, right, in these 4 series, and you're winning 2 out of 3 in each one, and all of a sudden now you're 15 games over 500 going into September. Yeah, you're in that spot where you want to be, where you're comfortable. And it's like, don't implode in September and we're fine. And you're right. You can manage the innings. You can get everybody the rest that they need and be fresh for October. So yeah, this is a nice stretch of 12 games for them. And like you said, if they can go 8-4 in these 12, that would be winning each of the series. Then I think that the Phillies are in a much better spot come September 1st than they were a year ago on September 1st.
Well, I know you have a date with Russ Joy here coming up soon, so you want to hit one last thing?
I do want to hit one last thing, Bob. And yeah, this was kind of an interesting thing. ESPN put out a story about they do it periodically, the MLB Awards Watch for MVP and Cy Young, and I thought that this was an interesting thing. I want to kind of run by you. Obviously, I think that the only one that's kind of a foregone conclusion is AL MVP is going to be Ohtani at this point. But the races for NL MVP and both Cy Youngs are pretty wide open. NL MVP, when I say it's pretty wide open, I think that there's 3 guys that any one of the 3 could get it. And I think that I know who I would pick as the winner, only because I think the other 2 guys are on the same team and may end up splitting some of the vote from their team. So let's start there. NL MVP right now, Acuna, Betts, Freeman. Man, are they 3 really, really good possibilities? And I think Acuna is still the guy, but it's hard to look past what Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman have done with that Dodgers team.
Well, I'll tell you what, odds makers have a little bit of a different overall take on this.
Do they really?
Oh yeah, like you go to DraftKings right now as we talk, because I was like, yeah, I'm with you. The 3 names I actually were thinking that you were going to go was going to be Acuna, Freeman, Olsen. Like it's getting hard to overlook Olsen's power numbers here. And Betts has been awesome too. Like there's no doubt about it. But check this out. Right now on DraftKings, you can bet Ronald Acuna Jr. at minus 750 odds to win the NL MVP versus the field. Any other player. You can have whoever you want. Plus 500. And then you can break it up by player. Acuna, again, minus 750. Freddie Freeman, plus 600. Second best odds. Matt Olson, third best odds, plus 1,700. Mookie Betts, plus 3,500.
That's a good bet.
Go, dude. If you think that Mookie Betts over the next 6 weeks can kind of bridge that gap, go throw $100 on Mookie. You're getting $3,500 back come reward season.
Yeah.
Or award season. Sorry.
That's a good number. That's a really good number.
Crazy, right? I actually am surprised. I mean, I know Acuna has the stolen base numbers to go along with the power production, the offensive production, but man, like that's like those odds are unbelievable.
Yeah. I mean, just so you know, so far this month in August, Mookie Betts 410, 471 on base, 705 slugging in August. That's pretty insane.
The issue, though, I think the issue for these guys like Freeman, all 4 of them, because they both play on the 2 best teams in the National League and they're going to win their divisions running away. They're not going to get drama down the stretch. Like,
right.
So it's not, Ronald Acuna isn't going to have, a 10-game stretch in September where it's like he put the team on his back. They don't need that. And I think that normally that might even hurt him, like when you get into like the narrative part of it. But the problem is that the closest competitors are either his teammates or another team that's going to experience the same thing. Like none of these guys are going to be able to capture that moment, right?
Yeah.
And I think you need, if you're going up against somebody like Acuna here, you're going to need those moments, I think, to let the storyline almost kind of catapult you to winning that award. They're not going to get that opportunity. It's going to be a pure numbers game.
Speaking of, let's talk about a wild race. Who do you have for NL Cy Young? Because right now, according to ESPN's rankings, the top 3 are Zach Gallen, Logan Webb, and believe it or not, Zach Wheeler.
Yeah. It's
they also add in Blake Snell and Justin Steele, Spencer Strider are also close, but that's their top 6 really.
Do any of those guys feel like a slam dunk Cy Young to you this year?
I'll tell you,
Zach Gallen right now actually has the best odds. Like, I don't know. I mean, he's had a really good year, but he kind of fell off a little bit. I kind of look at him and I go, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, he's had a really good year. Is Cy Young? Maybe.
Like Justin Steele, to me, has had the best year of all those guys. And I don't necessarily know if he's going to get the love for it, because of who else is in the race with him. is it possible that we have a Cy Young winner in Zach Wheeler this year, in a year where it's not Zach Wheeler's best year by any stretch of the imagination?
Yeah, I mean, he's going to have to be really good down the stretch. Like, every start is going to have to be awesome. He's going to have to be 6+ innings. Strikeouts to walks are going to have to be there. The run prevention is going to have to be pristine. Like, right now he's chasing, in terms of the odds, Galen at 175, Snell at plus 300, Webb at plus 300, Strider at plus 600, Steele is 700, and then Wheeler checks in with Burns, both plus 2,000. So again, if you think the door is open to Zach Wheeler winning a Cy Young, you're getting great odds there, because there are 5 guys in front of him right now. And I'll be honest with you, I'm with you on this one. Like, I think this is much more wide open than what the current odds would indicate.
Yeah. I mean, 2,000 to 1 on Zach Wheeler. Put that $100 down, guys. The Phillies play the weakest. They have the weakest schedule of any of these teams. Wheeler's going to get starts against bad teams, and he's done well. Give it a shot, right? It's worth to me. That's worth $100 investment, I think.
And it's always kind of funny. Like, you have to just not be paying attention to take some of these guys. Like Marcus Stroman plus 10,000. Like, Marcus Stroman might not even pitch again this season.
Yeah, I
know. Here you go, Aaron Nola plus 20,000. So.
Yeah, not going to happen this
year. The ultimate turnaround. So there you go. Yeah. I mean, so we'll see. It's interesting observation there by you on the Cy Young for sure.
Yeah. And real quick on the AL. I don't know what you got the odds there. Yeah. They have it. Garrett Cole is the leader right now, but close. Sonny Gray, who we just saw, and he pitched a hell of a game against the Phillies. And then Nate Eovaldi and George Kirby were the top 4. Ohtani and Bautista, Valdez, they're all kind of like
it's so funny. I mean, ESPN and the odds makers have just not collaborated on their assessment here. So Garrett Cole is minus 380. He's going to win the AL Cy Young Award. I think everyone probably agrees with that. But if you're looking for the dark horse, you have Gaussman at plus 450. You have Framber Valdez at plus 950.
Yeah,
we've got Steo plus 2,000, Ohtani plus 4,000. There's no shot. George Kirby plus 5,000, Eovaldi plus 5,000, and Sonny Gray plus 10,000.
That's pretty good.
So, you want to take a shot on a guy like Gray, the way that he's been going lately. You're getting awesome value there, but I do think that Cole's going to win that.
Yeah, award. I think you're right. I think the NL races are really, really interesting. I mean, obviously it's a 3-horse race for MVP. But Cy Young, to me, is a wide open field with any number of guys who can get it. And the Phillies have one of the guys that are going to be in that mix. So
absolutely. All right. Well, we will talk to you after this 3-game series against Washington Nationals on Monday morning. For Anthony Sanfilippo, I'm Bob Wankel. You can follow Anthony at AnSanPhil. You can follow me at Bob_Wankel. Make sure that you're checking out the show account at Up Phillies. And you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, anywhere else that you get your shows. Also check us out on YouTube, and we will talk to you soon.